We are in Paris and the live stream of today we're talking about FESB 2026. At FESB 2026, we're going to talk about decolonial neuroscience and a great place. That's the idea. Decolonial neuroscience and a great place. So what do we want to do with that? What idea do we want to convey? It's a somewhat unconventional idea. It's a very strong idea that we're going to share now. And we're going to give you a little bit of an idea from my life and a little bit about how I see neuroscience and how neuroscience has evolved. And we're going to talk about FESBE. FESBE is a meeting of biology researchers in Brazil, and FESBE 2026 will take place. In Brazil, it's a very beautiful and important celebration, and during this celebration, I decided to do a live stream from FESBE and highlight some important aspects that are important for FESBE to have, important for researchers to have. Since 2010, I've worked with researchers in neuroscience and biology, but who study the human body behavior, and physiology, obviously. That's what we're going to talk about. The first point I want to make to you is that in my ancestry, I come from Antonio Damasio, from Damasio Moreira de Castillo. I come from the lineage of Damasio Moreira de Castillos, who was prominent in the year 1889. He fought against the Republican coup. Look here, Jackson, why are you talking about this? Because you see, the Republican coup was in 1889, but in 1500, when the Europeans arrived here, there was a different coup, the invasion coup. And that's what we want to emphasize. I'll go back a little to a relative, which is Damasio. But even further back in 1500, another problem, when the Europeans came and invaded America, the entire American continent. And this is important. We're going to talk about FESB, we're going to talk about research, we're going to talk about neuroscience, decolonial neuroscience. So just so you have an idea that it's going to be a bigger whole now, okay? So let's go. When the Europeans arrive in these lands, they arrive for extraction, to get gold, money, something, and to take advantage of people and territories and develop extractive industries, to take things. And that's the model. So the model we have from that time is a model of an individual. It's a self. And this I works in this area, in this region. The I, this I in the individual, this character, this I is Iggy's, the one Freud talks about, and so on. It's all a European vision we have of ourselves. We have to overcome this European vision. We have to overcome it. And that's what today's live stream is about. The human being is not an I. The human being is a body territory. This change is very drastic and hasn't been made to this day. And we still continue with the human being being an I controlled by dogmas, an I controlled by beliefs. Along with this arrival of Europeans here on the American continent, now I am in Paris or in Europe, but being right there on the American continent. This coming with them has the idea of establishing and empowering religiosity itself. Now we're going to talk about God. Now we're going to talk about the Bible. Now we're going to talk about Jesus. Now I'm going to talk about hell. Now I'm going to talk about pain, eternal death, eternal pain, to punish and restrain this figure of I. But look, an I without territory, a fragmented I, and that's today's live stream. And in the next live streams, I think about 5 from now, in about 5 weeks, I'm going to delve deeper and deeper into the unity of the human being. The unity of the human being is a body territory. The oneness of the human being is not an I. The body territory has a lot of tensional forces. And that's what we're taking now to this decolonial vision for FESBE 2026, maybe 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030. I think that by 2030, I'll try to have this concept well stimulated, positioned, framed, shown. Jackson, okay, It's easy to say things, but open up more, open up more, open up more. How am I going to open these things up more? We have to look at science in two very important ways today. Today, you're going to look at science with human cognitive processes, which uses DNA, and with processes of rationality, logic, and reason of AI and DNA. Look here, AI, DNA. AIs use silicon, logic, and computers. Humans use DNA. So these are very different processes. We have to understand these processes to better understand science and not just keep cutting and piecing together to understand, never uniting to create something. After cutting and piecing together to understand, we have to unite the parts to create something, to exist. We don't exist in our parts. We are not just a nail, a finger, a foot, a nose. We are everything together. And science is studying teeth, noses, nerves, neurons, blood, urine, I don't know what, and it doesn't unite. By not uniting, we have an extractive process extracting values from humans and territories from us. So we are extractive because we classified, registered, cut up, and didn't add it all back together, didn't aggregate it. Unity encompasses all the parts, it's the whole. But if you cut up all the little parts, look at each one individually, you don't reach that whole, which is unity. Unity is something much greater. How are we going to divide these two intelligences? Artificial intelligence and this intelligence, which is the human intelligence of DNA. To me, DNA is intelligence. Just look, if I were to take bubbles, if I take metallic alloys, even bubbles and metallic alloys that come in clusters, we'll talk a little about complex systems, a little book on complex systems that you'll see the Italian author wrote, Complex Systems, a book on metallic alloys. There are structures, there are clusters, there are bubbles that bring together some structures and they stay close together, okay? One, if you study H2O, which is water, you study hydrogen, you can use oxygen. You'll know everything about hydrogen and everything about oxygen. When H2O becomes a molecule is another layer, it's another order. And a drop? A drop is basically a cell. It's a different order than that. So there are orders, layers of study that we have to have and understand. Yes, but in the case of the water molecule, it remains water from the droplet of vapor, ice, water, and continues to be water until the end. Okay? And that brings me back to my idea. In 1963, I was possibly an egg, a cell with DNA inside it. My DNA in 63 was there, and this DNA inside a cell, inside a cluster, inside a bubble, a human cell, an egg. This DNA began to move because it was in ideal conditions, conditions that I call neuropeia. It's a term, neuropeia is a very interesting Yanomami term. I use many of these older terms to mix with science and evidence to open up, to get out of the colonial mindset. Otherwise, you're stuck with terms that are already mass-produced and colonized. So neuropeias are conditions for the flow of life, conditions for the flow of life. There it is, the cell. My cell existed in 1963, and this cell existed with the DNA. The DNA begins to elaborate proteins and create a flow of water from here to there. Look how cool, the path of the waters. The water goes there and here. Cell duplicates, duplicates. The DNA continues, the cells are duplicating. The cells duplicate and form the basis of tissues. And they differentiate, it will become organs, it will become systems, it will become my body, it will become a fetus, it will become a baby. It's out. I was born in 64. So look at the flow. The water, the management, the movement of water in this neuron, the conditions of acidity, pressure, and heat so that these cells reproduce. That's the continuity. It's the same human being managing this water, and now I'm 62 years old, and in a while when I'm 90 something or 100 years old, this water that's being managed will leave the cell. I'll dehydrate, I'll die, it will end. So that's the path. This is a body territory being, from egg to death. This is the being. It's not my fingernail. It's not my hair. It's not the brain. It's not destiny. It's a whole together. And the most important thing at this moment, which is fundamental for Brazilian science and for Latin American science, is this moment of looking at the bodily unity, as a body territory. But does this only have to do with science? No, it has to do with politics. It has to do with the political. Politics places the citizen or the unit of the state as a family, and whoever directs the terms of the family is the church, is the politician. No, the citizen is a body territory. Here comes Damasio. No, my relative. Damasio Portuguese, a neuroscientist researcher who, over time in his life, said, "Look, I'm more of a biologist than a neuroscientist." He kept saying this because neuroscience had become very narrow-minded, very focused on something like neurons, blood, something kind of psychophysical. And he said, "I'm not going back to being a biologist." I heard a lecture of his at one of the conferences I attend. I'm in Paris now at a conference in France, the OITBM. But normally I attend the ICFM and participate in other neuroscience conferences. And I listened to Damasio a few times. So Damasio says the following: the human mind is a mixture of interoception, which you perceive from within, what you feel from within, the signaling of your biostasis, and your positioning in space, your proprioception. So you have an inside and an outside in a body territory. Simple, right? A body territory. That's the unit of the state, a body territory. So if the state would divide it into a minimum unit, it would be a citizen body territory. It's the citizen where he is, with the water he has and the land where he is. I can't divide the citizen as something outside the territory. That changes everything in science. So you can't analyze people outside their own territory either. Bring them to a laboratory, analyze them, and then roll a die. Want to publish in a journal? Go ahead, publish. There was a time, long ago, when neuroscience needed a little help from the public. And in one of those meetings, someone raised their hand and expressed an opinion on how the public could help Brazilian researchers. I raised my hand and asked, "Do you publish in English?" I said in a summary that nobody understands. "And how do you expect the public to help you? You're biased towards looking at human beings as ego, as id, as things that don't exist. The self within the human being has no place. So let's get into reality, into the body, the territory of people, into the needs that people have, and that's the idea." But I'm going deeper. This is just a critique. I want that with these next live streams we'll have. I'm going to go deep, 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 deep. I'm going to show you the need for AI, and I'm going to show you our DNA and our representation. And I'm going to try to talk about something now that you've possibly never heard of. Look. Every time we send a probe out of the planet, or to the bottom of the sea, or use technology to measure this or that, or an electron microscope, and all the measurements we make, all the measurements of physical, electrical, and magnetic forces, and so many discoveries we've had. These measurements are measurements of the equipment. The technology is made to measure and see through our filtering so that we can perceive and represent these measurements within our processes of abstraction, within our body territory. That's today's modality. Decolonial neuroscience is beginning to recognize that the entire process of registering information takes place within the body territory. This is important for you because if you are talking to me now and you are listening to me, you have first given a spatial representation of what I am saying within yourself and given me your attention. Otherwise, I wouldn't exist within you. So, this is fundamental. This is mystical. This is a big thing. And with today's live stream, we want to show and propose to you and to ourselves that our spatial representations within ourselves are in 5 dimensions. 5. Within the body as territory. Outside the body territory, we have AI. Artificial intelligence with its technologies detecting things. It detects things, it can even take a photo, and from that photo, which comes from reality, it is portrayed in pixels, and those pixels can be measured. We also, as we look at reality, that reality becomes an image. The image goes inside your brain and is placed within you in spaces. We are going to place these spaces within you in 5 dimensions. 3D, width, height, length, right? One more movement, one more qualia. Qualia? Yes, qualia. Qualia is a quality. If you talk about red, how intense is that red for that person? How much do I feel that red represents to me? Almost something semantic, but it's more than that. If I look at a figure or image, that image might just be a hollow balloon, but it could also be solid. What is the property? What is something more? I'll still use Amerindian terms after the next live streams about this. It's a quality of the material intrinsic to the material itself. Okay? Movement. Space is being created in movement. Curd, movement, and 3D. So we have 5 dimensions. Where? In the body territory, in you, in consciousness, and in the first person. So it means that you somehow a minor stomach ache requires a space in your head, in your body's territory, to represent it. A lot of neurons from various places represent that stomach ache. You have the memory activated that you want to go do this or that. These memories are activated. Or you're riding a bicycle, that active and dynamic memory is there. This memory creates a space. Spaces of pain, spaces of memory. These spaces move. These spaces move. In the movement of spaces, we have time and synchronicity. Without movement in space, there is no time. Fundamental, profound, extremely profound. That's why I say in the next live streams, we're going to see this in more depth. I'm going to give you the books that talk about this. So when you represent 5 dimensions, even without time, if you've represented 1, 2, 3 spaces and these spaces move in your head, your perception and your synchronicity depend on the movement of the spaces that are represented within your body. So you begin to have a worldview based on the spaces you pay attention to that you create. Isn't that interesting? Spaces are basically created by you. And these spaces, obviously not always by our will, are there. And the movement within those spaces is synchronicity. You have coherence in the representation within a body, a territory. And what happens when you're in a place and you're reading a book? The space for reading that book, because you have to learn. And suddenly a straw appears, a light comes on, a honk, a sound appears. Your attention shifts from the book to another place. That book, that area of the brain that was reading the book, processing, visualizing, it can simply become deactivated at that moment by the shock you received, and that reading space vanishes, disappears, as if a world were undone, as if it were reconfigured, as if the existence of that book ended at that moment. This is the dynamism of human DNA, of human intelligence. This is what FESB, SPNEC, SFM, and UAB need to study. DNA simply focuses its attention and makes things appear and disappear very quickly. Quickly, out of nowhere, things appear. And that's really cool. Even physics talks about it. Sometimes in some quantum physics experiments, things appear out of nowhere and come and go. This representation within the body, this territory, is already being measured. There are already some tests that we do with. In his improvisations, in his creativity, we perceive this kind of thing. The non-existent comes into existence. But there's more. There's a physicist who talks about the end times, the end of time. He says the following. In the Big Bang Theory, there's a 3D expansion where space is expanding, and at some point space itself might break apart. It tears the fabric of space. Okay. Within you lies your representation of your memories and your things. Regarding your life, especially your past, there exists a neural network connected to your body, a territory. And within this network, you can develop ideas based on a concept you had or have. This concept can grow within that network, and you can break through the spatial fabric. You can turn it inside out. You can transcend. And that's where the Yahami concept comes in, which I'm talking about, which is also an ancestral Amerindian concept. You reach a certain point of concentration, both in this study. Yahami is imitation. You imitate customs, habits, food, beliefs, faith, and after imitating faith, there are two paths. You go to blind faith, you just imitate and no longer use metacognition, or you go to the faith that smells of high performance, where you use metacognition and expand that understanding you had. When you expand, you turn things inside out. You create a multiverse within yourself. You see reality in a different way. Go back to the physical, where I talk about the expansion of spaces. The spatial representation in your brain is such that it reverses, inverts, and you see life in a different way because you've expanded the spatial representation within your body territory, within your brain and body. It's a very beautiful change. And we'll leave this change to the researchers over time. Little by little, I'll send you more data. I'll give you more research. We'll give you practical research on human behavior showing this. It's no use studying the human being in isolation. Studying the human being in isolation is like studying the properties of water by only looking at hydrogen. You'll never be able to understand the human being in memory. You have to see the whole picture. And now we go back a little further, talking about complex systems. In that little book by the Italian that he wrote about small clusters, bubbles, and metallic alloys, and then clusters and flocks, it's interesting that sometimes you put water to boil, or something appears in nature. Some bubbles appear growing and forming small bubbles, and inside a bubble, even a drop of water, there can be enormous cultures of microelements, micronutrients even. The cell itself is a kind of little bubble, but it has something inside and something outside. The tension of water, the property that water has an outside and an inside. These bubbles, these configurations are interesting. If it's pure water without nutrients, without DNA, I'm talking about a bubble, a synthetic bubble, a physical bubble, not a living one. A mineral bubble, let's say, it could have other names. This is important now. Why? AI is building mineral bubbles, bubbles of trends, of attitudes, of whether you are clear or not. And these bubbles on social media put humans inside them. The bubble itself isn't human, but it becomes a cluster. But a cluster made by AI, by an algorithm. We're facing this problem now. We're like billions of bubbles created by AI, full of humans, full of DNA. But it wasn't created by DNA, it was created by algorithms because it simply observes people's behaviors worldwide, and these behaviors are combined through statistics, through data, and you gather and create bubbles, these bubbles based on affinities. Okay? It's important to know this. But look, these are air bubbles. They're not existential bubbles. Yes, but people are losing their sense of existence there. And then there's the bubble that is human, which is your relationship. Your relationship isn't screen to screen, human to human, in all dimensions of the human and in its representation. It's the touch, it's the human coming together, not screen to screen. Do you understand? These differences are very important. Trying to redo everything and showing, pulling towards FESB, SBNAC, STM about the human behavior map. That's when the collective comes together and we join, we make collective flights together within a collective DNA. But if we go to social media, we can be in the same fake collective, a collective of AI, of social media algorithms. And it's not so real anymore. It's not so existential. Behind the AI community is the predatory exploiter. Who is the predatory exploiter, Jackson? Are you in favor of grand conspiracies? Not at all. Look, the predatory exploiter, for example, in the case of Brazil, is nothing more than 200 wealthy CPF holders. People who receive most of the money lent to the state through debt securities, close to 1 trillion reais per year, seize the state, don't pay taxes, and increase taxes on the poorest. If the state is considered a body territory, the unit of the state is the citizen. If the state is considered a body territory, all the state's profitability should be distributed to the citizen, who is the body territory. So we are talking about retail CBDC, citizen direct, and the money being created. Credit card, no debit. Society has changed. Today, the money created by those who hijacked Brazil is generated through debt, with trillions being paid in annual interest. And I'm saying that money can be created through credit without debit, direct retail CBDCs within the citizen's territory, and with direct carbon credits within the very territory of those who maintain that territory in good condition. It's reversed. I've reversed society. Capitalism has changed. The rules of capitalism remain the same. Everything is the same, but it has changed. Because now a person won't be chasing after money with greed and anxiety because they are a unit of the state. And as a unit of the state, they have to receive state revenue. Because today, whoever kidnaps the state takes the money out of the state and sends money back to the state in dollars, saying they are investing in the state. The money they laundered abroad, the money they stole from the state, and there are only 200 individuals involved. So let's raise our awareness, even in research studies at FSB and SBNEC, to understand that this entire mass of our researchers is being bombarded with ideas that attempt to study human beings not as a body territory, but rather as fragments, as fingernails, as little things, as cutouts, studying people. And it will always leave those politicians who are lackeys of those super rich who have hijacked the state. These politicians don't have much power. They are easily replaced. The super rich are there earning $1 trillion, close to $1 trillion earned by the Brazilian state and other states in Latin America. And they put in the politicians they want, however they want, and judges, and keep changing rules. And they don't let the Constitution include the territorial body, and they don't let the Constitution include the type of citizens' hierarchy income for each territory body. They don't. Yes, but that's a high-level executive decision. So any president can do it? Yes. Does he want to? Their economists come from the financial market, right? And the financial market is enslaved by these people who have already hijacked the Brazilian state and hijacked our science as well, because the money goes to this and not to that. And it doesn't allow studies to happen in a way that breaks the paradigm. But I'm here. I'll try until 2030. We will fight hard to establish behavioral unity, the unity of the human being within the territory. The individual is a body territory. It's the individual, it's their heart, it's their mind, it's their little body, it's the territory where they are. It's the water you drink, it's the environment you're in. And that individual's performance must exist. A core performance, a performance of body and territory. That's what I wanted to leave you with, folks. I know the live stream is a bit rough because I'm in Paris and conditions aren't always as good as in Brazil. Big hug. See you later. I couldn't even see the time.